The tiger. It's this powerful symbol of wild, untamed nature. But what if I told you the real story of its survival has less to do with faraway jungles and a lot more to do with what's happening, believe it or not, in our own backyards? The truth is way more complicated and, honestly, way more surprising than you probably think. So, let's get into it.
When you picture a tiger, this is probably the image that pops into your head, right? Majestic, mysterious, a creature of the deep wilderness. But this beautiful, romantic image, well, it's only one half of a very, very strange story.
Now, I want you to look at this number, 5,000. You might be thinking, okay, is that how many tigers are left on the entire planet? But the real story behind this number is something else entirely.
That's right. In the United States alone, there are an estimated 5,000 tigers living in captivity. Get this, that is more than are left in the entire wild. All of it. This is the wild paradox we're digging into today. And it makes you wonder, right? As we pour all this effort into saving tigers in distant jungles, are we ignoring a massive problem happening right here at home?
So to really get why that paradox is so important, you have to look at the immense pressure on the tigers that are still in the wild. And their single biggest threat? It's the relentless, illegal trade in tiger parts.
And check out this quote from a recent report by Traffic, the Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network. It just frames the problem perfectly. It's a twin attack. You've got poachers hitting the wild populations hard, but at the same time, those huge, often poorly regulated captive populations, like the thousands in the US, can basically act as a parallel supply chain, feeding the exact same illegal demand and making it almost impossible for law enforcement to figure out where these parts are coming from.
In the scale of this trade, it is just staggering. Between the year 2000 and the middle of 2022, authorities seized parts from at least 3,808 individual tigers. And you got to remember, that's just the tiny fraction they actually managed to catch. The true number is probably way, way higher.
And this image, this shows the grim reality behind that number. These aren't just statistics. They're what's left of these incredible animals, poached for their skins, their bones, and other parts, all to feed a black market for luxury items and so-called traditional medicines that have no proven effect.
And here's the thing, this threat isn't static, it's evolving. Trafficking actually surged in 2023. And look at this shift, criminals are moving more and more whole tigers, both dead and alive. And this is the kicker, 2/3 of these whole tigers were seized in countries that don't even have wild tigers. That's a massive red flag that they're being sourced from captive breeding farms.
But the fight to save tigers isn't just happening out in the jungle against poachers. A quieter, and maybe even more insidious fight is being waged over the numbers themselves. How do we know we can even trust the data on how many tigers are left?
Scientists actually have a term for this. They call it a political population. It's what happens when the pressure to show good news, to show that conservation is working, leads to inflated numbers or big claims that aren't really backed up by solid, verifiable science.
So, a perfect example. A 2019 study took a hard look at India's widely celebrated claim that it had doubled its tiger numbers. The researchers basically said, hold on a second, arguing that the methods used had some serious ambiguities and just weren't strong enough to support that amazing headline. And that's the bottom line, isn't it? If we can't trust the data, how on earth can we know if our conservation plans are actually working?
Okay, so in the face of all of these challenges, from poaching to political numbers, conservationists are now turning to some seriously cutting-edge technology to get a much, much clearer picture of what's really going on out there.
Now, camera traps are a fantastic tool. They give us this incredible secret window into the lives of wild animals, but they also create a new kind of problem, a data avalanche. We're talking millions and millions of photos. For a human researcher, trying to sift through all of that to find and identify individual tigers is, well, it's a monumental, almost impossible job.
So, say hello to a new tool nicknamed Who Am I? It's basically facial recognition, but for tigers. It's brilliant. A deep learning AI scans the photos. First, it just detects if an animal's even there. Then, it confirms, yep, that's a tiger. And finally, this is the magic part, it analyzes that tiger's unique stripe pattern, which is like a fingerprint, to identify that specific individual animal.
And the results are, well, they're incredible. The AI is super accurate. It's just spotting an animal and saying what species it is. But look at that third bar. It can recognize an individual tiger with about 90% accuracy. This technology is a complete game changer. It lets scientists monitor populations with a speed and a scale that was just science fiction a few years ago.
But what if technology could do more than just count the tigers that are alive right now? What if science could actually help us bring back a type of tiger that's already gone? Now, I know that sounds like something out of a movie, but it is the real-life basis for one of the most ambitious conservation projects on the entire planet.
Okay, so to understand how this is even possible, we need a super quick lesson in tiger genetics. For years, scientists have argued about how many distinct subspecies of tiger there actually are. You had the lumpers, who said there are basically just 2. And then you had the splitters, who, using modern genetic tools, argued there are 6. And this academic debate, it turns out it has huge, real-world consequences. So let me introduce you to the Caspian tiger. It once roamed across the huge forests of Central Asia, but it was hunted into extinction. The last confirmed sighting was back in the 1970s. It just became a ghost. But now, Kazakhstan is leading this incredibly bold, multi-decade project to bring it back. As you can see on this timeline, they've set aside a massive new nature reserve, and in 2024, the very first tigers were actually transferred there to get the program started. The goal? A wild breeding population by 2035. But that brings up the big question, right? How can you reintroduce an animal that's extinct?
And this is where that whole subspecies debate becomes absolutely critical. Genetic sequencing revealed something amazing. The extinct Caspian tiger was nearly identical to the living Amur tiger from Siberia. For all practical purposes, they're the same animal, just separated by geography and time. So, by reintroducing the Amur tiger into the Caspian's old home, conservationists have a real shot at bringing a lost piece of an ecosystem back to life. So when you step back and look at it, the story of the tiger in the 21st century is just full of these deep contradictions. You've got these terrible threats, but also incredible innovation, staggering loss, and unbelievable hope. And I think the crucial point to take away is this. Saving the tiger isn't a simple problem with a simple solution. It's not just about stopping poachers. It's this complex battle being fought on all fronts, on the ground, in government offices over data, and at the absolute frontiers of science with things like AI and genetic restoration. And that brings us right back where we started, to that bizarre paradox. We are fighting tooth and nail to save the last few thousand tigers in the wild, while at the same time, thousands more live in cages, often completely unmonitored. It forces us to ask a really fundamental question. In a world where there are more tigers in backyards than in nature, what does saving a species truly even mean?